They say truth is stranger than fiction, but what unfolded at Skinwalker Ranch defied both. For decades, this 500-acre stretch of scorched Utah desert sat nearly forgotten by the outside world. Nestled in Winta County, surrounded by hills and a thin forest edge, the land was untouched and undervalued. No crops, no cattle, barely any wildlife. It was as if nature itself had withdrawn. Locals called it cursed land, and most wouldn't stop their trucks within a mile of it. But in 1994, a rugged cattle breeder named Terry Sherman saw opportunity, not fear. He bought the land cheap and moved in with his wife Gwen and their 2 kids. The place seemed perfect for a ranching dream: open space, solitude, and plenty of land for cattle to roam. Yet on the very first day, the family found things that didn't make any sense. Every door inside the house had bolts on both sides. Doors between rooms, closets, even the pantry. Thick iron stakes stuck out of the ground around the house's perimeter, still attached to giant, rusted chains. Terry assumed the last owners had paranoid tendencies or vicious dogs. He didn't know the ranch had sat empty for years before the sale. No one mentioned why, and maybe that was deliberate. While unpacking their things, the family spotted something strange approaching across the plain. At first glance, it looked like a huge gray-furred dog trotting toward them from the far tree line. But as it got closer, the thing didn't shrink with distance. It just got clearer. It walked like it had joints in the wrong places. Its eyes didn't reflect red in the sun. They absorbed light, like black pits. Terry, a seasoned rancher who'd seen his share of big predators, felt a gut-deep wrongness he couldn't explain. Still, it didn't attack. The creature calmly walked among them, wagging its tail. They froze in silence, unsure if they should breathe. The animal approached T, Aries' father, and brushed against his arm like a friendly dog. It was massive, standing nearly shoulder-high on the old man. They all stood motionless, as if under some kind of mental fog, watching it like spectators rather than potential prey. Then it noticed a calf with its head through a fence not far from the truck. Without warning, the wolf lunged for the animal and clamped its jaws around the calf's skull. It began yanking with terrifying strength, trying to pull it clean through steel fencing. That's when the trance shattered, and Terry acted. He pulled his revolver from his hip and fired. The shot hit. They all heard the impact, but the wolf didn't flinch, didn't bleed, didn't even react. More shots followed, closer range, until Terry was virtually standing over the thing and hitting it with the butt of an axe. Still, nothing. Finally, the creature gave up on the calf, turned, and calmly trotted away like it had simply lost interest in the game. Terry grabbed his high-powered rifle from the truck and fired once more, point blank. The creature stopped, glanced back, and then disappeared into the tree line. No limp, no sound, just gone. The air afterward reeked of metal and swamp water. Terry and his son tried to track it through the woods. The ground was soggy and perfect for prints. For about 40 yards, the wolf left behind deep, clear paw prints. And then, nothing. The trail ended as if the animal had lifted off into the sky. No blood, no broken branches, just silence. They returned to the house shaken, trying to write it off as adrenaline confusion. But something had happened. Their first day on the ranch, they had already seen something that didn't fit anywhere in natural reality, and from that point on, it would only get worse. Much, much worse. Strange incidents began happening inside the house. Subtle, eerie things that didn't involve wolves or woods. One morning, Gwen unpacked a full load of groceries, stocked the fridge and pantry, then left momentarily to clean another room. When she came back, the groceries were back in their bags, sealed, untouched, like she'd never unpacked them. Later that week, she hung her towel on the rack before stepping into the shower. When she got out, the towel was gone. She found it several minutes later, dry, and hung neatly inside a closet upstairs. She began to wonder if she was losing her mind. Gwen kept these moments to herself at first, embarrassed and shaken. But then Terry had his own encounter. He was digging fence post holes using a specialized digger weighing at least 70 pounds. After clearing several holes, he left the tool on the ground to go inside for lunch. When he came back, it was gone. Furious, he asked his family if anyone had touched it. Everyone denied it, and no one had been outside. A week later, while checking his property for wolf tracks, Terry found the tool lodged in a tree 70 feet above ground. Balanced on a branch it never could have reached naturally. Something was not only watching them, it was interacting with them, experimenting. The missing tool, the teleported towel, the reversed groceries, none of it was malicious. But it all felt calculated, like tests being run just to see how the humans would react. Gwen tried to reason it out. Maybe it was stress. Maybe sleepwalking. Maybe trauma from the wolf. But logic couldn't explain 70-pound diggers flying into trees. They all began keeping journals, documenting everything in case they were being toyed with, because that's what it felt like. They were part of something. They just didn't know what yet. As winter arrived, new phenomena emerged. Lights. They first appeared on the distant ridge as faint flashes. At first, Terry believed they were hunters or vehicles who had mistakenly driven onto his land. But the lights didn't behave like normal headlights. They would hover, dart, stop mid-air, then slowly rise into the sky without noise or flicker. He saw them multiple times, but kept it to himself. Then one night, he followed one, rifle slung on his back. He figured he'd catch whoever was trespassing. But what he found only deepened the nightmare they were already trapped in. He reached the field just as the light began to ascend. And that's when he realized there was no sound, no engine, no crunching tires. Just this glowing white orb, lifting silently into the night. The moment it disappeared behind the trees, the entire area turned quiet. Even the wind stopped. When he turned around, there was something behind him, just at the edge of vision. No sound, no clarity, only a presence. He ran back home, too shaken to speak. And from that night on, the lights weren't occasional. They were routine. What's worse, the animals started responding to them. Cattle that had once freely roamed began huddling together and mooing mournfully at dusk. One cow disappeared entirely, leaving behind a trail of tracks in the mud that abruptly stopped in the center of a pathway. No blood, no drag marks. It was there, and then it wasn't. Similar incidents followed in the weeks ahead. More lights, more vanishings, more dread. Whatever this was, it hadn't just come to be observed. It had come to observe them back. Terry began patrolling the property every night, armed with high-powered scopes and a sense of slow-burning obsession. One night, while tracking a missing cow, he reached the tree line where the earlier wolf had vanished. He spotted hoof prints, the kind only fresh cattle would leave. Clear, heavy, slow. They led steadily into the trees, winding into deeper and darker woods. But like the wolf, the prints just disappeared. No blood, no return path, no signs of struggle. The forest had consumed another animal, without leaving any proof. In the following weeks, 4 more cows vanished under identical circumstances. The remaining herd grew anxious, refusing to graze at dusk and crowding near the house at night. The mood on the ranch turned heavier, like the land itself had become aware of its victims and was slowly closing in. Gwen noticed the silence first. There were no birds anymore, no crickets, no distant cars, not even the wind. Everything felt paused, as if observing itself. Terry stayed up at night, watching without blinking, like a man trying to catch a ghost in the act of breathing. Then came the craft. Terry spotted something hovering near the trees, a shapeless mass blending with the night sky. No sound. It moved like liquid wrapped in shadow, with multicolored lights swirling across its skin. It scanned the ground with beams like fingers sweeping the dirt. Terry hunched low, crawling behind bushes, watching it pass overhead. Then he made a mistake. He shifted slightly, brushing against fallen leaves. Instantly, the lights cut off. The craft froze mid-air, turned deliberately, and pointed at its invisible face toward him. Terry didn't breathe. Until, without warning, the ship vanished into the dark. Spring brought terrifying clarity. Disappearances were no longer limited to animals. Figures started appearing, silent humanoids wandering the edge of the ranch at night. 2 ear heads locked forward, blank faces turned toward the house. Gwen saw the first one from the kitchen window. Tall, motionless, breathing fog onto the glass. No mouth, eyes, or nose, just smoothness and shape, like clay molded to resemble almost human. It stood there long enough for her to drop the cup in her hands before it turned and walked away. No footprints, no trace, just fear. After that, they came in 2s or 3s. Sometimes they'd press their hands on the windows and whisper in a liquid language none of them could understand. Sometimes they'd tap on the walls at night in rhythm like Morse code, but they never broke in. They didn't need to, because now the Shermans couldn't sleep. They locked every door and bolted the house shut, but the pressure grew. Gwen lost her banking job due to paranoia. The kids stopped sleeping entirely. Terry reinforced the walls, replaced every curtain, and laid salt at each door. One night, while sitting with his rifle on the porch, Terry saw a new kind of light, orangish gold and shaped like an eye, floating low on the horizon. Through his scope, it wasn't a light, it was a hole, a literal portal. Inside it, daylight, blue sky even though it was midnight outside. And crawling out of it was one of them, the faceless figures. It pulled itself onto the ground like a spider escaping hell, then sprinted for the trees. Behind it, more were coming. Terry dropped his gun. He didn't even aim. That night, the ranch truly became something else. At first glance, the blue orbs seemed almost beautiful, pulsing silently, the size of softballs, hovering just above the grass. But anyone who approached them felt instant, crushing anxiety. Not fear, dread, like something ancient was observing you from inside a black hole of thought. The orbs made no noise, but carried weight, emotion, pressure. Dogs growled the moment they saw them. One night, 3 blue orbs floated into the yard where Terry sat with his dogs. As they approached, the dogs began barking wildly, then vanished into the woods before Terry could react. Terry watched from the edge of the porch, unable to move. The blue orbs followed his dogs calmly into the trees and dimmed. Seconds later, he heard the dogs yelping, then nothing. He didn't sleep that night. In the morning, he and his son followed the trail, hoping for tracks, for signs, for anything. What they found instead were 3 circles in a clearing, burned patches with nothing left but ash. Not bones, not collars, just 3 perfect piles, as if something had vaporized them into memory. It was the final straw. The ranch had claimed too much. Terry called the news. He broke his silence and told the world about Skinwalker Ranch. Strange lights, vanishing cattle, faceless beings, and now, disintegrated pets. The public mocked it. Most skeptics wrote it off. But not everyone. Among those watching was aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow, quietly obsessed with proving the paranormal. When he saw the report, he didn't laugh. He made a phone call. Days later, Bigelow owned the ranch, and he wasn't there to raise cattle. He brought scientists. The Shermans thought their nightmare was over. But the story was just beginning. Bigelow formed the National Institute for Discovery Science, staffed with PhDs, engineers, and skeptics who didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't want believers. He wanted curious minds that could see past folklore into evidence. They scanned for hallucinogens in the air and soil, checked for toxins in the water, and interviewed neighbors. Everything was normal. No radiation spikes, no poisonous plants, no fraudulent family. And yet, strange things kept happening. Instruments malfunctioned. Cameras failed the moment they pointed toward bright lights. 1 year passed with little activity. But the second year, something broke that silence in a terrifying way. Terry and Gwen were tagging a newborn calf, attaching a bright yellow tag to its ear. They walked away for 40 minutes, then returned. Something felt off. The calf was lying in the same spot, but it wasn't whole. Only its legs and head remained, and the ear with the tag had been removed. No blood, no drag marks, just remains, surgical precision, and the same old silence. Within minutes, the NIDS team arrived, and they were stunned. This wasn't a predator kill. The veterinarian said the cuts were clean, cleaner than anything seen in surgical training. There was no blood anywhere, nothing to clean up. Whatever did it in under an hour without being seen or heard. The whole team spread out in cars, scanning the skyline and the trees. At each observation point, the dogs stationed in kennels were cowering, and every one of them was staring in the same direction. Terry saw movement in the tree. It wasn't just an animal, it was the wolf, or something like it. Perched up high, legs bent wrong, glowing eyes watching them back. Terry had 4 prized bulls, massive, temperamental, and worth a fortune. One afternoon, he passed their corral and saw all 4 calmly standing inside. An hour later, they were gone. No broken gates, no prints, just gone. In his heart, Terry panicked. He rushed the grounds, calling for help. Then, on a strange tip from his instinct, he peeked inside an old trailer wired shut years ago. Inside were all 4 bulls, packed impossibly in that miniature box, completely still, asleep, breathing, but unmoving. When Gwen shouted Terry's name, the bulls woke up and panicked, thrashing against the walls. It took hours to get them out. The trailer showed no sign of forced entry. It had never been opened. Cobwebs were still intact over the entrance, and inside, no feces, no hay, no scratches, just bulls, confused and angry. The NIDS team confirmed it was impossible. Getting even 1 bull inside required sedation and manipulation. Getting 4 in without opening the door was, by all logical standards, not just improbable, it was incomprehensible. One last thing stood out. A section of the corral had become highly magnetized, enough to scramble compasses. 2 researchers, while measuring fields at the fence, smelled the metallic stench again. That rotting chemical odor that always came before something. Their compasses began spinning, then locked, not toward true north, but toward the tree line where that great beast once vanished. They barely spoke, but described the exact same thing. Whatever was out there, watching, planning, wasn't done. Late one night, 2 scientists sat on a ridge with night vision scopes, watching over the homestead. It had become routine, eyes in the dark, hoping for a glimpse of phenomenon. Then the portal formed, orange and oval, pulsing near the trees. One scientist raised his goggles and gasped. Inside, the light was a blue sky, like a window to another world. And, decrawling out on all 4s, came a faceless black humanoid, fluid in motion, horrifying in shape. It clambered to its feet and began sprinting up the ridge toward them. They froze. It passed 30 feet from their position, never making a sound, yet leaving crushed brush in its wake. The stench filled the air, burning metal and swamp rot. But then, nothing. It vanished into the rocks. The 2 scientists, professionals in reason, could barely speak. Days later, it was gone. All of it. The lights, the sightings, the craft. Like something had finished watching and left. Terry left the ranch for good. The research ended. Bigelow pulled out. The science couldn't measure what didn't want to be found. But one truth remains from everyone who ever stepped foot there. The lights weren't the danger. The creatures weren't the threat. The real horror was realizing you were inside something's home, and it wanted you to know it. Skinwalker Ranch isn't cursed. It's inhabited, and sometimes the watchers are still watching.